Let's turn to John chapter 19. John chapter 19 from verse 26 to verse 27. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. The title of today's message is, "Behold your mother." So I want to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day. And today, what we're seeing is Jesus' amazing gesture of love toward his mother. So, in the Bible, when you study the Bible, there's kind of a tension between faith and family. So, for example, when you study about discipleship in Luke chapter 9, in verse 60. So someone comes to Jesus and says that he wants to follow him, but first let him go bury his father, and Jesus tells him coldly to let the dead bury the dead. Let the dead bury their own dead. So what we come to see is that when it comes to discipleship, that one of the standards and one of the characteristics of discipleship is that it's hard to be a disciple of Jesus while following the family, and in a way, discipleship of Jesus, being a disciple of Jesus, can often involves a physical separation from the family because of ministry work. That's what we can see. But people, I think, often misunderstand this part about Christianity. So, when you look at Christianity, there's like two versions of it. There is the genuine Christianity, and then there's the caricature of Christianity that people make of it. So caricature is like one of those drawings that people do that's totally exaggerated of a person, totally distorting their features. When we say caricature of something, we mean it's like a distortion of what that is. So caricature Christianity is to, for example, just to say superficially that, looking at the discipleship that Jesus taught, to say, Jesus taught to hate the family because he said not to bury your father. So that would be like a caricature of Jesus' teaching and of Christianity. But there was a situation in which Jesus said that. So if you think about it, Jesus' ministry was not very long at all. I'm not sure exactly, I didn't have time to really calculate when that happened, and it's not easy when you look at the Bible to really place the events and the times, but it could be a matter of months or at most a year or two before Jesus died, and then after then he has to ascend to heaven. So this man, if he wants to hear and to learn the words of Jesus and to learn the way of Jesus, by the time he goes and comes back, he's already lost, he likely has already lost that opportunity. And so in that situation, Jesus said this. And what Jesus meant was that, believe it or not, there are some things that are more important than burying your father, although that is considered not only very important, but the most important thing as you live is to bury your parents. But Jesus is saying that, believe it or not, there can be something that is more important than that. Not saying that that's not important, but there can be something that is even more important than that. So, so the point is that genuine Christianity is not where you don't love your family, but it is where you go beyond that love to experience an even greater love. One thing that I want to point out is that back then, to take a trip, to do something, would have taken weeks and months and sapped all of your strength. And we live in a really good time where we can actually go someplace and come back anywhere on earth within a single day. It's a really good time, but that was a very different time. But the point still remains that there is, genuine Christianity is not where you don't love your family, but it is to go beyond that love to experience an even greater love. In other words, Jesus was teaching a greater love than was ever experienced on the earth before. So previously, the greatest love on earth was the love of family. But Jesus taught that, believe it or not, there is an even greater love than that. Jesus taught that to love a stranger and to love your enemy is even greater than to love your family. But it doesn't mean that you don't love your family, because greater love always contains the smaller love inside. So just like a bigger container can contain a smaller container, but the opposite is not true. The smaller container cannot contain the bigger one. So which is the bigger container? You have to know this clearly. Is it the love of God or the love of family? So we have to be clear which one is the bigger container so that we can know which one contains the other and which one we should focus on doing as we live. But if you think about it, why is it that these two things have to be in tension with each other? Why is it that these two things have to clash? So it's because we are limited by time and by our physical limitations on this earth. So simply speaking, we cannot be in two places at once. But when you accomplish the love of God, then the love of family is accomplished inside of that automatically. So in that sense, these two don't have to clash if you're practicing Christianity the right way. So that is genuine Christianity versus the caricature. So genuine Christianity is where you practice the real love of God, which is the bigger love that contains the smaller love of family, and that gets naturally accomplished in the love of God when you practice that properly. Amen? So we see here that the Father God allowed the time when Jesus would be able to show this deep gesture of love to his mom, even though it was the last moment here at the cross. Even in this, this horrifying situation, in the very last moment, but God still allowed him this opportunity to show this deep gesture of love, even in this situation and even at the very last moment. So it's not that Jesus had to carry the cross or love his mother, but he did both. In fact, Jesus always had love for his mother, even when he was doing his ministry and didn't have time to see her. So there was a great misunderstanding that happened because of this. But the misunderstanding was on his mom's side, not on Jesus' side. Jesus always loved his mom deeply in his heart. That is a fact. So truthfully, when we think about it, we can actually love even more deeply because of doing ministry than if we were staying at home all the time, because when you're away, then you have a chance to miss that person more. And also, following the love of God makes you love even more deeply and better. So you can love that person even more because of that. So when I was very young, I used to be very close to my mom because I was the youngest one in my family. It's a very simple thing because in my family there is only two. So you're either the oldest or the youngest. I was the youngest, so I was closest with my mom. But as I grew older, there was a gap that formed between us, between me and my mom and with my parents because of sin and because of cultural and language barriers. So whenever I meet Chinese people nowadays, they're always shocked and surprised. Like, how does this American person, how is he able to speak Mandarin? And he has like really great pronunciation, you know? And I'm shocked too, because I didn't realize I had great pronunciation. I don't realize it. And I thought I looked Chinese, you know, so I'm always doubly shocked. Like, why are they shocked? But that's the impression, I guess, when they meet me, is like, how does this American speak Mandarin? Like, his pronunciation is so good. But this indicates two things. Number one, that's how little my parents spoke English. And number two, that's also how little that I could communicate with my parents, because people who try to speak Mandarin to me, although my pronunciation is good, they soon realize there is an extreme limitation to my vocabulary and my ability to express in Chinese. I can't actually hold a full conversation in Chinese. That's how little I was able to communicate with my parents. So they couldn't speak English, I couldn't speak Chinese. We couldn't talk to each other. So growing up, I always envied kids whose parents spoke English properly, because, you know, how good would it be to be able to talk to each other, you know, to be able to talk to and understand one another. So that's a problem that a lot of second-generation kids have in America, is that, you know, they can't communicate with their parents properly. So usually kids and parents grow really far apart when their kids go to college, because now the kids have their own life and they're physically very far apart now. But a funny thing happened to me in college is I got evangelized, which itself is interesting because, you know, I thought I was already a Christian. So, you know, it's kind of interesting to be evangelized as a Christian. But although I was a Christian, I did not go to church, I did not pray much, and I hardly ever read the Bible, which, if you think about it, what kind of a Christian is that anyways, right? So in my own heart, I believed myself to be a Christian, and I believed in God, but it was very, very thin faith, to the point that most people probably could not tell nor even knew that I was even a Christian, which was the whole point. When Apostle Paul says in Romans that I'm not ashamed of the gospel, I can really relate deeply, because, you know, in a way, that's why I sort of hid my faith, because I was kind of ashamed of the gospel. I was ashamed of my faith. But you should not be ashamed of the gospel or of your faith, but you should be proud of it, and you should share it. You should show it, your faith, loudly and proudly, not be ashamed. And your faith in Jesus should be the most prominent aspect of your life, and that is when it can really transform you through and through. So anyways, I was evangelized, and then what happened was that a lot of the Christians that I met turned out to, a lot of the passionate Christians that I met at college, a lot of them were Koreans, and so I started to learn a little Korean. I married a person who was Korean. And what happened was it had this interesting side effect, which was it made my Mandarin better. And so now I could communicate with my parents better, and that made my mom very happy. So But more importantly is that by going to church, I became mature, so I came to understand my mom and dad better. And then, more important than the language, but because I became mature through my faith, so our communication was able to improve that way. So we could understand one another's hearts much better. So you see, following God's love and following Jesus makes you love everyone even much better and much deeper, even your own family. And therefore, in our own church's experience, a lot of our members come from backgrounds whose, non-Christian backgrounds. But a lot of our members' parents became believers of Jesus because of their children's faith. And if your parents are already believers, what happens is that, in our experience, the parents' faith becomes much better because they become challenged by their children's faith, and they realize that we should believe in Jesus much more sincerely. Through the children, the parents, if they were already Christian, their faith becomes much better and much more passionate. So in this sense, the bigger love of God contains the smaller love of family like this. You accomplish the smaller love naturally as you follow Jesus. So an important thing is that although Jesus didn't always have time during his adult ministry to express the love in his heart to his mother, but he did it here when he had the chance. So someone said that when you are young, you get to spend the most time with your parents than you ever will for the rest of your life. And as you get older and older, you spend less and less time together. So while you are young, you should express love well to your parents and to your family when you get the chance. So someone noticed, I read often, people notice that these days when families go out to eat, instead of talking to one another, they're always like looking at their phones, right? So I've said many times that it's important to look people in the eye and really share when you're together. Don't be, doing other things or distracted and looking at your phone. But when you have the chance to be together, look people in the eye and try to share. Because you never know when will be the last chance that you get. So I know it sounds crazy, but the way to love is to always love as though this is the last chance I will ever get to express love to this person. And there's a saying that I heard, something like, dream as though you will live forever, but love as though this is the last day on earth. I think that is a very profound thought and saying, right? The way to love is not to think, I'll get another chance, and you never love correctly, right? If this is the last chance, then to express my love, that's how you can love properly each and every single time. So that's what Jesus did here, right? This was literally the last opportunity. So he really poured out his love to his mom when he had the chance this way. So the family is like a laboratory of love in which you practice how to love in a healthy way. So you know that in this world there is a lot of counterfeit love that just wants to take away. So counterfeit love is always selfish and destructive, and it's only based on, physical attraction. In other words, it is not pure, it is impure. And it is not something harmless, but it's something that does real and permanent damage to people. So to the parents, I want to say and want us to think about how can we protect kids from that kind of counterfeit love. So you can do it by, when you have the opportunity, and show a lot of real love when you have the chance. So there is a saying that experts at detecting counterfeit money, they don't spend their time studying counterfeit money, but they spend all their time touching and studying and playing with the real thing, so that when the fake bill comes, they can tell immediately there's a difference. So recently I read this interesting story about someone who found counterfeit bills. Like, they found a lot of them, right? And he said that it was so good. I mean, like making counterfeit bills is it's very expensive to make it well. It's by design so that people don't make counterfeit bills. That's why the real one is very expensive to make. But he said that these were so good. It was so good that it must have been made by a state-sponsored counterfeiter. That's how much money and expertise would have gone into making it. He said it was just so good. But he said the funny thing was that it was so good, but all the numbers on the bills were the same. Like, there's like a serial number. He said they were all the same. He said it's weird because they went to all that trouble to make it so good, but this small little detail, they just completely ignored it, It wouldn't have been a big deal for them to make it, but it was weird that they made everything else so nicely, but only an expert could have really paid attention and really would have noticed, right, that all the numbers were the same. So in the same way, kids that know real love, they can detect the false love really well, and they will know intuitively that that is the false love because they know the real thing. So when I think about it, there is something like a kind of similar experience that I have, and that is, as I grew up, my parents, they exposed me often to authentic Taiwanese food. So nowadays, like when I go around, it's actually that, in a way, that makes my life more difficult now, because as I go around and eat, I'm very sensitive to the fake, the inauthentic ones, right? And there's a lot of that. That's one of the things that my parents have complained about a lot before they passed away, is that they were saying nowadays, it's very hard to find the authentic taste, because they said the previous generation of Taiwanese chefs, this was their theory, they all passed away without passing down their knowledge to this current generation. So they don't know how to make it, they said. But as I thought about it, funny thing is that as I grew, so my parents, so because I could tell so well the difference, so my wife was telling me that this is evidence that your parents really fed you a lot of good food when you were growing up. The fact that you're so sensitive to the difference between the authentic and the fake one. But when I think about it, growing up, I actually did not like it. I much preferred like McDonald's and fast foods and things like that. When they gave me that food, I was like, why are you giving me this food, But as I get older, as I mature, the more I appreciate how brilliant that authentic food is. So likewise, true love is incomparable to the fake. So while you are still young, you should receive a lot of true love so that you can tell what is counterfeit from what is true. And you should express your love deeply while you have the chance. So Jesus expressed his love to his mom when he had the chance, like this, at the cross. I remember we had a funeral here before for one of our church members' father, and one of the things about his life story was toward the end of his life when he was sick and in the hospital, then his daughter invited a minister to go to the hospital and share the gospel with him, and he accepted Jesus just before he died. And when I heard that, the word that came to my mind was, that is so clutch. That word clutch came to mind, because at just the right moment before he passed away, at the moment when his heart was opened, she invited a minister to go and preach the gospel to him, and he accepted Jesus. So now when he dies, then he can enter heaven, right? Because he was saved. So I thought, this is the kind of son or daughter that we need to have. This is the kind of son and daughter that we need to be. We need to be clutch like this. When there is the opportunity to love, we need to seize that opportunity, right? So when you look at the Gospels, it's full of the regret of the disciples that while they had the chance, they did not properly show love to Jesus. It's telling us that they missed that opportunity. That we need to be clutch. We need to seize that opportunity to love when it presents itself, right? Jesus, he did not lose this chance, although he didn't have a lot of opportunities because of his ministry. But when the opportunity arose, he expressed this amazing deep love to his mom. So don't miss the chance to love and don't regret. I remember when my own mom was ill with terminal cancer. At that time, I tried to call her more often. And, but because she was ill, so she used to be very talkative when she called, but then when she was ill, then she was too weak to talk very much. But I tried more when she was ill to call. And I remember the day when my father called me and told me that my mother had fallen into a coma. And I remember thinking at that moment, the last call that I had with my mom, I think the day before, that's the last call. I was dumbfounded, like, that's the last call I will ever have with my mom ever again. I will never be able to pick up the phone and call my mom and tell her I love you ever again. I remember thinking that. And it was shocking because I never imagined, I never thought about that. So when you think about it, like no one ever tells you like this is the last chance we'll ever meet again. This is the last call that we'll ever have again. There's no one who can really predict that, right? Even when you're ill, you never know when is the last when. So that is why you have to treat each time as though it is the last time. That is the way that we need to love, and we shouldn't let that opportunity slip away. So Mother's Day, when I think about it, this is the day when you call your mom and you say, I love you, right? And for some of us who are older, our mothers have already passed away, so through our prayer to God, we have to deliver our love to mom. For those whose moms are still on this earth and alive, I wish that you could express that love to mom just like Jesus did. That's the point and the meaning of Mother's Day, right? Is to remind you to call your mom and tell her that you love her. So I wanted to add one more thing, and that is what is the love of mom, and something that we should think about on Mother's Day. So the love of mom is where, so simply speaking, mom's love is like the closest example we have to God's love in this world. So the way that mom's love is where she is always, she's always trying to empty herself out and trying to lose to her children. So, I gave the example before where, my mom's dream when we were growing up, there's just me and my brother. Her dream was that when we grew up, that each of us we would both become wealthy, and each of us would give her $100,000, and so she could have that money. So when I think about it, neither of us became wealthy, and not only that, but I think in order to support my ministry, she actually gave me $100,000 instead. So if you think about it, like, she completely lost in that aspect, right? But even though it looks like it's a complete loss, but it's not losing, but she actually completely won. Because by losing that way, that is the way that mom conquers our hearts, right? By losing, mom completely conquers our hearts that way. So I gave the example before of, there is this card game that you play. It's actually called Hearts. It's a really amazing game if you think about it. There's like 4 kinds of cards, right? There's spades, there's cloves, there's diamonds, and there's hearts. This game is called Hearts. And in that game, what happens is you're trying not to have cards remaining at the end. And if you have cards remaining, then the more cards you have, the more you lose. But that game has this really profound thing, is that there's this really special thing inside of that game. What happens is if one person gets all the cards, he loses all the way completely, then what happens is they win the game. If you lose all the way, you win that game. And I thought that's exactly what love is, right? It's where you lose completely. The one who loses completely and loses the most, they're actually the winner. So, in that game, what you call that is shooting the moon. And it's interesting because that word moonshot, the meaning of it is something that is really hard and difficult, beyond what you could possibly accomplish when you try to accomplish that. That's what you call a moonshot. And so what is the love of mom is that she's shooting the moon all the time, right? She's always trying to lose more. And through that, by losing completely, this is how mom, she conquers our hearts. This is why we can never forget the love of mom. So I thought about, as we live, how much do we resemble this kind of love? And are we the ones who are trying to shoot the moon like this? This is the love of God. This is the love of Jesus that we should resemble, right? This is the meaning of when Jesus said that it is finished. What it means, what did he finish and what did he accomplish, was Jesus was trying to give out everything. Not only did he even give out his clothes at the end, it is finished means that he succeeded in even giving out his life for humanity. That is what he means when he says it is finished. It means he succeeded in giving out everything, including his own life. This is how Jesus conquered the heart of the entire world. So on this Mother's Day, I hope that we could remember this love of mom that resembles the love of Jesus, the love of God. And I wish that everyone has a happy Mother's Day, and I wish you could think about the love of mom deeply today.